He may be a grand fromage, but the President of the European Commission is behaving like a spoilt child. Jean-Claude Juncker is one of the men Britain must negotiate with over Brexit. But recent behaviour makes him look like a Premiership star denied a penalty. Take a look at what he said in a speech this week in Italy.
I'm agitated between English and French. But I made my choice. I will express myself in French. Because slowly but surely English is losing importance in Europe. And then...
Well, that might get a guffaw from a room full of Brussels bureaucrats, Monsieur Juncker, but you'd be a fool to turn your back on our mother tongue just to score a cheap point. English is the international language of business, of civil aviation, and is vital for trading with emerging markets such as India. So try and force all your friends to speak Francais, if you like, Jean-Claude, but you'll be cutting off your nose to spite your face. English has been spoken for more than 1,000 years, and it still will be, long after you've enjoyed your last late-night brandy. But since you insist on speaking French for now, Monsieur le Président, here's something you will understand. Jusqu'à la vôtre, mon ami.
Nick.
I can't believe I had to translate for the multilingual.
You've been practising, haven't you? It's a very subtle point that comes across when you're speaking, but I get the impression that you're quite proud of the English language and Britain's place in the world.
Yes.
So help me understand this. If you see Britain's role in the world as so crucial, why do you think that we should extract ourselves from the international organisation that is our main trading partner, our main vehicle for relating with the world? And if you think we should extract ourselves, then how can you argue that Britain should be the country at the centre of international relations and the English the main language?
In these times, these heady times of a general election, I'm going to do the politicians thing, and I'm not going to answer your question because this isn't about Brexit. This is about Jean-Claude Juncker's, I would argue, puerile... And we can have the Brexit argument, and indeed we have, but I sense perhaps the viewers would like to move on or perhaps return to it at another date. This is about someone who does wield a position of influence. I question his suitability for the post. He has now accepted that one of his staff briefed what was a private dinner between him and Mrs May, which is a pretty bad thing to do. It came out that Mrs May was, quote, a delusional woman living in another galaxy, whatever. And this was exceptionally childlike. And when you have negotiations of this level, which are crucial to Britain, no question, probably the biggest thing we've had since the World War, in fact, it will be the biggest thing, it deserves to be taken seriously. And seeing something like that, I think, just reduces it to the playground.
I would like to separate out Juncker's behaviour, which I agree there are definitely some issues with, and I think we're going to discuss that a bit later in more detail, and Guy Verhofstadt and the other people who have been...
You say Guy, I say Guy.
who've been, you could argue, a bit childish recently. I'd like to separate that from, I think, the bigger question you're raising, which is the role of Britain and the English language in Europe and the world. And I think that you have to accept that the direction that we're going in, which is increasingly inward-looking, is absolutely at odds with the idea that you're clinging to, kind of illogically, that English should be the language of the EU. Why should English be the language of the EU?
Because it is. Because it is. You know, it's 1.5 billion people on the planet speak the language. I've had businesses in 30 countries around the world, and you know what? If I was trying to do that in French, I don't think I'd be sitting here today.
How is your French?
Actually, very good. So what I'm saying is, I think what Nick is saying, it's not an opinion, it's a matter of fact. And I think for him to stand there, you know, criticising it, I think actually makes him look a fool himself. You know, if you go anywhere in the world, you know, the biggest market from a business perspective is India, 1.5 billion people. It's their second language. So to denigrate it in that way, to say, you know, English is getting a bit diluted.
Juncker was just stating fact. I mean, when the UK leaves the EU, the working language of the Commission are currently English, French and German. Now, there's no need for English to be one of the working languages of the Commission, unless it suits them diplomatically to have a working language of none of the member states.
Excuse me, what are the Irish going to do?
Gaelic.
They speak, well, their
official language is Gaelic.
What, so they're going to put it into
They
Gaelic?
have nominated Gaelic as a language of the
But
EU.
I think what
I know, well, the
Juncker is
Maltese
saying
have
is-
nominated Maltese, but I'm sure they fancy a bit of English every now and
It
again,
was
don't they?
Nick, it was legitimate trolling. Come on,
Of
you know,
course.
of course he
Can
can
I-
say. But wait, just one thing on the Brexit thing, on that dinner, in
Yep.
which you were so affronted that Martin Selmayr leaked. Let's forget that we wouldn't know about that dinner unless there was a German-speaking correspondent for the Economist newspaper sitting in Berlin who actually read it in German. We Brits could have been blissfully unaware of this because we're so monolingual that we had to depend on one foreign journalist who actually spoke a second language. And the real point that Juncker is making is we actually don't speak enough foreign languages
No,
ourselves.
I don't
so we
disagree.
can't expect the rest of the
Rachel,
world just to speak English.
Can I give you a good example of this? If you take the Eurovision Song Contest with all the
I
countries...
would like you to take it. Never bring it back.
Well, if you look at that, the vast majority of those countries actually sing in English. So just to
True.
give an example, let's look at the
expecting that as an
Moldovan
example.
entry. It kind of illustrates the point.
Mama, mama, don't be so down. All the keeps going round and round. Mama, mama, don't be so mad. If you knew me, you'd be surprised.
That's right.
And your point is?
Who had James Calm down as a Eurovision
That's the
fan?
most damning thing I've heard so
Street
far.
cred shot.
If you have to rely on the Eurovision
Well, I
Song
was trying to make a
Contest
point
prove
here. I did.
his place in the world.
Badly, clearly.
But surely,
Right.
as you say, Rachel, it's just a bit of political point scoring, isn't it? And jousting and taking the mickey and winding people up. And he's got your hook, line and sinker.
Yeah.
He's known for his sarcasm and his mickey taking. I don't agree that it's appropriate. I think it's inappropriate because this is so emotional, these negotiations, and become so emotive and emotional that people are going to want to jump on anything that suggests that the other side are holding some sort of prejudice. And when he says something like that, although it's a joke, although it's a light-hearted jibe, people can jump on that. And actually, I think they're in danger, potentially, the bureaucrats, of actually turning some people against them that were for them if they're not careful, because you could sit there after Juncker said that and go, actually, well, he's making a ridiculous point there. So actually, I've got a bit more sympathy with Theresa May's position and the British government's position in this. But equally, I do think we're going to see more of this because there's going to be lots of sort of shots taken just to try and create an atmosphere of conflict. And that's my broader concern, is that we actually end up in a conflict situation. I don't mean physical conflict, but a verbal conflict situation.
Well,
I mean,
It's
Juncker is doing Theresa May's job for her.
I agree.
I mean, it was a huge gift to her that he
agree.
came out, and everyone could now think, we've got to stand up to the bullying Brussels bureaucrats now, who are trolling us on our English language and leaking.
Well,
it was
But
a gift.
I think, just quickly, he is actually doing us a favour because, I mean, of course, James, like, English isn't going to disappear as the language of business and diplomacy, but at the same time, I think we do have to think about these things. You know, leaving the EU is going to have consequences. I know you'd like us to just act like Brexit's not happening today, but it is.
No,
and it
I
has
just didn't want to
consequences.
rehash the old Brexit argument.
Do you think that if they did, once we've left and they dropped English, would you read into that in some way, shape or form? Would you be offended by that? Or?
Oh, no, I wouldn't be offended at all. I mean, I agree with, and James is a businessman, I can't see how they can ever drop English. I mean, here's something quite funny. On Monsieur Juncker's own Twitter account, 65% of the messages are in English. So he's also, it's a true fact, he's also creating a problem for the French as well. Can we just remind you some of the words? Because goodness knows what they're going to call Saturday and Sunday, because le weekend will go. As for croque monsieur, well, that's just known as le sandwich. We'll all have to give up le smoking, and James, you'll be sending le email, as I know you regularly do. So every which way you look, it's problem. But where you are right, it's ugly mood music, isn't it?
It is, I know. But here on The Pledge, we speak the international language of love and amity, don't we?
Always.
A mixture of dialects.
Yeah.
But if you come back to the central point, as they say, Afua, I know that you feel that it is the Brexit conversation and that the Brexit is...
Brexit.
Le Brexit. It probably is Le Brexit.
Yeah.
If Britain was to behave in a similar fashion and Mrs May or the Foreign Secretary or the Defence Secretary was to start making cheap jibes and refusing, it would go down, understandably, very badly, and I think the British position would be weakened. We would demean ourselves.
Hold on, Nick. She accused the EU of meddling in our election completely without any legitimacy whatsoever. There's no evidence that the EU was meddling in our general election whatsoever.
Jean-Claude Juncker taking the position that he did, and we've got to tread fairly carefully because we...
in the general election?
Well, describing one of the
candidates...
Hold on, describing one of the candidates as delusional.
She didn't. He said she was on another galaxy.
No, and a delusional woman, which we've got to tread carefully because, of course, we are in the middle of a general election.
But that's
you
okay.
Don't think that's... Come on,
sure. It was not meddling. That is a very serious international, almost crime. I mean, people in America, heads are rolling all over the shop because obviously they don't want to get into how the Russians could have meddled in the US election. It's an extraordinarily serious thing to say.
You don't think that briefing in any way was to try and unsettle the position of the Conservative?
As we previously concluded, it actually aided Theresa May.
Yeah, but never mind that. Never mind the way it actually turned out.
But inadvertently, he wasn't deliberately trying to undermine her position.
James?
No, I don't think his intention was genuine at all. I mean, listen, we all know it could have gone either way, and I think by releasing those comments, I think his intentions... were dishonourable, really.
Well, I hope that the junk doesn't continue, and I'm trying to move smoothly into my subject, which is junk food. Yes, exactly. So we're going to end that there and start talking about our diet.